What's up, goobers? So the Switch 2 is finally out. Hallelujah. You know what I mean? Finally, I can play Pokemon Scarlet at more than 4p. It's kind of weird saying goodbye to the Switch. I mean, I grew up with the thing. I was in 8th grade when it came out. Especially since the Switch 2 kind of looks like it's just going to be the younger, homogenous sibling. Overall, I don't think a new Nintendo console has ever been met with such a resounding apathy. The Switch 2, in most ways, is simply a far more powerful Switch 1, which isn't particularly exciting. It's still a mind-bendingly simple OS. There's still only 2 themes. You got your Joy-Cons, your semi-flimsy kickstands, but at least now I can see the screen clearly. And honestly, that's all I've ever wanted. So needless to say, I absolutely love this little freak. The other reason behind the minimal talk surrounding this console is the one flagship launch title, that being Mario Kart World, and oh boy, let's talk about it! So I'm gonna say the same thing that I did last time I covered Mario Kart on this channel. I know this isn't a JRPG, but if that scares you, just know I will threaten and hurt you, so be scared of that instead. Mario Kart World is in sort of a strange position. Never has a single Nintendo console had 2 Mario Karts available, save for Double Dash with Wii's backwards compatibility and Virtual Console or whatever. Let's put that aside. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is held by a very large chunk of the fan base as the definitive entry in the series, so with it still being available on Switch 2, what should Nintendo have done? Double down? Just make a Mario Kart 9? Simply provide a game that follows in the clearly laid out footsteps, creating another definitive entry? Or make Mario Kart World, a mechanically quirky, radically differently structured kart racer with an open world and playable conch door? This is a rhetorical question, of course, one that's kind of hard to answer. Mario Kart World is a strange game, excelling in many places and falling completely flat in a lot of others. The fact that this game is different, that it's not the unabashedly definitive Mario Kart experience, is not a problem, and I'm glad that Nintendo didn't seem too concerned with playing things safe after the runaway success that was 8 Deluxe, because if that was their primary directive during developing the game, it would have felt wholeheartedly derivative. Mario Kart 8 is over 10 years old now. God almighty! Even if World may be objectively messier and less content-rich, and as a game I would argue worse, I am glad that it is at least notably different. 8 is peak fiction. We're not gonna argue that. This is a safe space for everyone but people who argue that. But it did always reek of a personality-less era for Nintendo. And in opposition to that, Conch Door. But when it comes to pushing this series forward, I don't know if World was the best route to take. I can word vomit for years, so let's actually get this going. What is actually different in Mario Kart World? What is making me broadcast my heart attack on YouTube? Well, the big gimmick this time around is a more radical shift than we've ever seen before. Mario Kart 7 may have had underwater and flight sections, 8 may have had these zero-gravity twisty things, and everyone was a baby, but nothing quite matches up to World's big overhaul. Everything in an open world. Every track has its own little spot where it's nestled, with roads, mountains, hills, lakes, and oceans in between that are entirely explorable. And this is where World's biggest strengths and weaknesses are born. In place of the standard 3-lap structure for races, you instead have all of these intermission courses where you race through the open world. There are bridges, highways, backroads, a decent amount of variety within these intermission tracks. In the Grand Prix, this all takes the form of a 3-lap first race, and then a drive to the next where you only complete 1 lap of that track, rinse, repeat 2 more times. This is weird, to say the least. Now, I want to preface anything I say with the fact that I am aware that a 3-lap structure for Mario Kart is not a make or break. This isn't like how many kids you want, or like whether or not your spouse is a murderer. I don't know what I'm talking about. In fact, many of my favorite tracks in 8 were the ones that didn't loop at all. These served as cool, monumental set pieces, or at the very least, a cool way to break up the monotony. But let's be honest here, most of your time spent in Grand Prix is probably going to be in first, because for some reason the vast majority of Mario characters drive worse than you, when you were 5. I'm starting to think that these games are the direct cause of the degradation of my generation's ability to drive, but my point is that mixing around the standard is how we get most exciting things. However, when a standard is being challenged, it's very important to focus on how the alternative is executed, and sometimes less what the alternative actually is. I'm down for a switch up, and that's what this is. It's new, it's fresh, it's remarkably different than the Mario Kart we've all been playing for a decade now. Sometimes these intermission tracks are really cool, and I welcome them with open arms. You'll be blasting through highways, swamps, busy bridges, raging storms at sea, and since these sections don't loop, the monotony is cut down greatly upon replays. However, you do find yourself quite often just driving in a straight line, and since you'll be up front, a lot of the time you'll never have to worry about hazards dropped from a previous lap. There are more than enough ways that these sections provide obstacles, but not consistently. This is really all to say that a lot of the time spent in these intermission tracks isn't particularly all that fun. Your biggest threat will be the blue shells that are way too frequent. I can't say in good faith that these intermission tracks are a valuable trade-off to racing these tracks for 3 laps, because a lot of these tracks are actually really cool. A lot of times I'm left wanting to spend more time on these tracks because they're good enough to warrant more time spent. You don't need the intermission tracks. These stages are really good. The one thing I think is extremely cool is that there are intermission tracks that connect tracks that don't connect in Grand Prix mode, and this is for the sake of the online races and also versus mode. This results in a lot of variety, a lot of intermission tracks, but that still doesn't change the fact that quite a few of them are just, by and large, not interesting. Quality over quantity here. Like, why have a bunch of kids if they all suck? I feel as if this problem is fixed rather simply too. Have you do the intermission track, then do 2 laps of the main track. Sure, the Grand Prix will be like 5 minutes longer collectively, but this game is $80, so I expect to spend some serious time in it. You know what? No, let's focus in on that for a second. This game has 32 tracks, a bloated roster of character costumes that hide a fairly subpar roster, structural problems to the core, so what warrants this game to be $20 whole more than 8 Deluxe? If not for the open world, nothing. Nothing more than exploitation. This is simply the unfortunate truth. I won't dwell on this for long, because I do own a Switch 2. I bought into all of this, but this game is hilariously overpriced. And in my opinion, its big selling point of an open world Mario Kart falls completely flat, because even though I played this game a whole lot already, the free roam concept is by far the least interesting aspect of it. So whenever you're feeling weird, you can press start on the main menu to go into a free roam where you can just wander around and kind of do whatever you want. Scattered across the world are these P-switches you can hit that activate certain challenges, rewarding you with kart decals. I don't care. They're barely noticeable. Pretty much everything you're going to find in the open world is cut from a similar cloth. These bite-sized little challenges or tiny little collectibles to find that really don't amount to much of anything at all. It's not content, really. That's like the side content you fill a game with when you're doing the larger content, except in this case, there isn't the larger content. I don't know, bro. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that this open world exploration aspect of the game amounts to very little actual substance. The biggest gift that it brings is that it allows for the intermission courses in the first place and contextualized all of the locales, and that does make the Grand Prix more memorable. But like I said, that by itself is not a flawless inclusion, so you can't really die on that hill. The only thing I see as an objective improvement over 8 Deluxe is the game feel itself, because Mario Kart World, it feels great to control. I mean, it's a fun game. I don't want to detract from that. This is not a bad game. It's loose but not too slippery. The new jump, rail grinding, wall grinding all opens up the floodgates when it comes to shortcuts and freedom of movement. I kind of wish that more of the courses were built around these abilities though. As it stands, the course designers seemed a little bit gun-shy when it came to allowing extensive use of these abilities effectively. The moments when rail grinding and wall slithering are actually beneficial are pretty rare. Many times grind rails take the form of guardrails on the outside of turns, so where you don't want to be, or walls that simply just wouldn't benefit you to jump on all that much. Now, I imagine these abilities are front and center at higher levels of play, but since when should Mario Kart be designed with that in mind? And I doubt it was. Most speedrun strategies aren't intended, at least to a capacity. There's also this knockout tour thing, and it's not a selling point like they wanted it to be. The concept is an uninterrupted 6 intermission track race with a chunk of the racers getting knocked out with each section completed. This is a really cool idea for an alternative mode, but it doesn't really supply anything more in the way of actual substance. It's mostly a remix of content that's already here, and it's not done in a particularly imaginative way. In all honesty, my experience with this mode so far hasn't been particularly fun either. It's essentially a bloated drive through the open world, which means that fun, exciting set pieces and shortcuts are rarer than in a normal Grand Prix. So I don't feel as if it's a more enjoyable alternative to the Grand Prix. It kind of just is one. I imagine it could be pretty fun online, but it kind of just feels like a Mario Kart Battle Royale, and that concept simply just doesn't excite me. You really feel the overabundance of blue shells in this mode. Like, goodness gracious almighty, I hate this item. Does anybody like the blue shell? I hate getting hit by it, and I hate getting it when I'm behind and would rather just catch up. Say what you want about balancing or whatever, but it really just feels like a nuisance 90% of the time. Knockout Tour. It's a good inclusion, but it is what it is. That's a direct quote, actually, from my baby picture on my grandma's mantle. The simple truth here is that Mario Kart World set itself up to be both a quirky entry, but also the most exploratory, experimental, and massive. And the final project doesn't really feel like that. If there was more to the open world concept that really proved to me its necessity, I think that would be different. And it's not like the concept doesn't inspire, there just isn't all that much there. I can think of so many things that would have made the free roam a significantly more valuable piece of content, but as it stands, it is never the thing I'm turning the game on to do. It's never something I want to do at all. It feels like the concept was thought up, the world was designed, and the top tier tracks were created and placed, and then the free roam mode itself was saved for like a month before the game was gonna ship. It's an inspired concept with extremely uninspired execution. You're kind of just wandering around. There's no hook other than the big world. Open world games have been past that selling point for like a decade. You need more than that. So in the end, this game feels at odds with itself. In certain places like the music, visuals, track design, game feel, it's phenomenal. I'd argue the best we've ever seen. But where it stood to trailblaze, its new modes, intermission tracks, the open world to explore, it simply stops far before it ever should have. So to come back around to a previous point, this game is in a weird position when it comes to being a launch title. It certainly looks good and runs pretty good too, but I don't know, look at other Nintendo flagship launches. All the Nintendos launched with big Marios. GameCube had Luigi's Mansion, the Wii had Twilight Princess, the Wii U had Mario Bros. U. Okay, to be fair, no one really cares about that in the bigger picture. But when it comes to Nintendo games that launch with consoles, they tend to be some of the most beloved titles in the company's history. I mean, the first Switch launched with Breath of the Wild, for heaven's sakes. That's kind of hard to compete with. And that's not to say that Mario Kart World had to, but I can't see it having the same impact that other launch titles from Nintendo have had. It doesn't signal anything exciting to come from the company. It's a decent game, but I don't see it having a lasting impact on the culture like Mario Kart 8 did. Maybe I'm wrong. Right? Maybe I'm completely off base here. I've watched very little content on this game, and I'm honestly not even aware of the general consensus on it. This is my opinion, though, at the end of the day. And if you're here, you are openly admitting to live under my rule as dictator, so say whatever you want, it don't matter. Now, to answer a question that I never begged to begin with, but should be considered, is this game worth $80? Does it sell the potential of the Switch 2? To the first question, it's a good game at large, but no. Unless if you're gonna really play this, do not spend that much on it. And to the second question, does the Switch 2 really need to be sold? I think as a game, Mario Kart World had very little riding on it, even as the first Switch 2 heavy hitter. This console's gonna sell itself regardless, based off of its concept alone, and frankly, so will Mario Kart World. It's not a bad game. It is worth your time in many areas, but as the big next step for one of Nintendo's biggest things, it's pretty rough when I can't say that any of its unique ideas would be something I'd actually want to see again. So in pretty much every way other than the one that actually matters, the Switch 2 is off to a pretty tepid start. I mean, Donkey Kong Bonanza looks pretty cool. I'll probably play that. Maybe. It's $70, I don't know. But at the moment, I'm actively looking for more. I want reasons to use this console outside of just playing the Switch 1 games I didn't play at a slightly higher resolution. What's even out at this point? Is there anything I could play again? I don't know, I mean, anything to not go to work. What a mess this game was.